Good evening. I'm James and welcome to Social Work. Tonight we are investigating single parents and the social, financial, and educational strains that single parents and their children face on a daily basis within Australia. Firstly, a single parent can be defined as a single mother or father with a child or children who are considered dependent or under the age of 15 years. A study conducted by the Australian Bureau of Statistics in 2012 discovered that there are 961,000 single parent families in Australia, making up 15% of all families, of which 780,000 were single mothers, or 81% of all single parent families. However, this rate of single parents has remained the same throughout Australia for a number of years. In 1986, the Australian Bureau of Statistics found that 14% of all Australian families were single parent families. Single parents face many challenges, no more challenging than financial stability. A single parent holding a full-time job can become a rather daunting juggling act. As a result, statistics show that an increasing trend of single mothers holding only part-time jobs. In 1997, 23% of lone mothers worked part-time, which had increased to 32% by 2006. However, in a study conducted in 2004 by the ABS, results showed that 61% of one-parent families relied on government payments as their primary source of income, thus creating incredible financial strain in many circumstances. The financial stresses that single parents face compared to couple families can be best demonstrated in the average net worth of their household. In 2004, the average net worth of a coupled family was $471,000 compared to $129,000 for single parents. Financial stresses aren't the only worries for single parents. Housing and accommodation is also a considerable issue for single parents. Statistics show that a staggering 64% of single parents are renting, whereas 63% of couple families are paying off their home. Over to you, Daniel.
Thanks for that, James. Today we're looking at sole parents and the two differing explanations of why they live in poverty. Sole parents are exposed to two differing explanations of inequality and poverty relating to firstly their individual choices and secondly a number of structural factors which lead this particular group to face adversity and poverty. According to the Australian Council of Social Support, sole parents are at an alarmingly high risk of living in poverty, with roughly a third, 33%, of sole parents living in poverty in 2012. Along with this statistic, over a third, 37%, of all children living in poverty were from sole parent households. This reflects the lower rates of employment amongst sole parents, in particular households with very young children, and the low level of social security payments for these families facing adversity. Why is this? As previously mentioned, today we will be looking at this issue at an individual level and also a structural level to determine why this focus group is at such a high risk of facing poverty. From an individual viewpoint, when looking at sole parent factors relating to them living in poverty can be direct choices they make in regards to the matters within their direct control, including what they spend their money on, their lifestyle choices, where they choose to live, and their overall work ethic and willingness to find a job. Although all these factors are an individual phenomenon that can eventually lead to poverty within the sole parent sector, other structural factors or opportunities have a far greater impact on sole parents living in poverty. Things including cost of childcare, everyday living expenses, and being able to afford adequate housing. Most sole parent families live on low incomes. Over 70% are in the bottom 40% of Australian households ranked by income. It is well known that sole parent families on social security payments face a high risk of poverty. $550 per week isn't usually enough to meet basic living costs for a family of three. Around 2/3 of sole parent families rent their homes, and it is now common for rents for 3-bedroom properties in capital cities to exceed half of this income, roughly $275 per week. Sole parents and their children often have to go without the essentials of life. For example, the Social Policy Research Centre found in a recent survey that 43% of parenting payment recipients lacked a decent and secure home, 57% could not pay a utility bill in the last 12 months, 56% lacked $500 in their savings account in case of an emergency, 54% could not afford necessary dental treatment, 24% could not afford up-to-date school books and clothes, and 40% could not afford a hobby or leisure activity for their children. Along with this, sole parents are usually unable to find adequate childcare facilities which are in their budget to allow time for themselves to find a job, creating a snowball effect from the beginning. Over to you, Shannon.
We'll now talk about how sole parents' lives and opportunities are impacted due to inequality and poverty. There are many reasons for sole parent inequality and poverty. Due to economic change, the number of sole parent unemployment is a lot higher than two-parent families. Sole parents are at a higher risk than coupled parents when it comes to finding and maintaining affordable housing. They have less control over their life and how they spend their money. They may also struggle to afford basic health services, education and leisure activities. Beaumont, Marsh and Panetta explain that sole parents may not be able to afford adequate housing. This can result in overcrowding, putting a strain on sanitation facilities, increasing the risk of infection and psychological distress. Inadequate cooking facilities may increase the risk of obesity, cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes and some cancers. If there is an unsafe physical environment, this may also increase the risk of injury. Lack of education services hinders their employment opportunities and they may struggle with the cost of providing their children with adequate education. This can also increase their children's chances of unemployment and poverty. Sole parents living in poverty may not be able to afford basic healthcare services. They may not get regular immunisations against infectious diseases. This can increase the risk of contracting preventable diseases. Many of these diseases are severe and can lead to disability or even death if left untreated. Preventable diseases include tetanus, measles, whooping cough and hepatitis B. They're also less likely to access health services such as breast screening, which can lead to health conditions going undiagnosed and as a result, fewer treatments are available if diagnosis is made late. Poverty and its causes suggest that sole parents may rely heavily on financial support to live. This can be embarrassing for some as they feel like they aren't good enough or letting their children down because they can't afford basic everyday needs. Government income support payments don't always provide sole parents with the adequate income, and some payments can often be below the Henderson poverty line. Beaumont, Marsh and Panetta suggest that they have an inability to afford fresh, healthy foods, which means they're forced to buy cheap, processed foods that have added salt, sugar and other harmful additives. This can increase the risk of diet-related diseases such as obesity and cardiovascular disease. Depending on the area of where sole parents live in and the number of children they have can restrict their employment opportunities. Dwyer suggests that poor health and lack of transport can act as a barrier when looking for employment. Inadequate pay and unflexible work hours, such as having to work at night instead of during the day, means that they are less able to look after their children at night times. Beaumont, Marsh and Panetta suggests sole parents living in poverty are more likely to suffer from higher rates of physical and mental illness. Due to living in poverty, they can become quite stressed and result in poor behaviours to try and cope with their daily stresses. This can include smoking, which causes respiratory problems, leading to cancer. Implications of inequality suggest that sole parents may lose their sense of identity due to low self-esteem due to the stigma of being unemployed, feelings of despair due to the lack of control they have over their own life, increased stress and anxiety, and feeling trapped. We'll now head over to Dylan, who will talk about a social benefit scheme.
Thanks for that, Shannon. For those people out there that fall under the single parent category, there are a number of different social security benefits that can be accessed through Centrelink. The one that we will take a closer look at today is the parental payment for a single parent. This payment can be up to $725 per fortnight for an eligible single parent. There are certain criteria that must be met in order for an individual to qualify for these payments. These are: parenting payment is paid to the principal carer of a child. Only one child or guardian can be the principal carer and receive this payment. You may qualify for parenting payment as a parent, grandparent or foster carer if you are single and care for at least one child younger than 8 years of age, or you have a partner and care for at least one child younger than 6 years of age, and that income and assets of both you and your partner, if you have one, are below certain amounts. You meet residential requirements. You agree to have a job plan if you have mutual obligation requirements. You meet mutual obligation requirements if needed, or you may have mutual obligation requirements as a principal carer. The total amount an individual can get paid will depend on the assets they have. The claiming process is similar to that of any other welfare payments in that you must bring in the required documentation to a Centrelink office so they can process the claim. This payment may be adequate for an individual to scrape through from fortnight to fortnight. However, it would be quite challenging for a single parent to do so when you break down all the costs of living. The average cost of rent and amenities, including gas, water, and electricity, is $615 a fortnight in Australia, keeping in mind that the maximum welfare payment is $725 per fortnight. This only leaves $110 for any other expenses that can arise. As you can see, these bills account for a large sum of a single parent's welfare payment. Firstly, depending on the housing situation of the single parent, this could play a huge role in determining how freely they are able to live. For example, if the single parent were living in a house with their child or children, this could greatly increase the amount of money they must fork out for rent. If the parent and child were living in a share house or with relatives, they could have significantly decreased rental payments, which would allow more money for other important factors. These expenses have been taken out of this fortnightly welfare payment, and we haven't even looked at grocery shopping, let alone any potential fees or expenses for the child. After briefly looking into some of the expenses faced by a single parent, it is hard to see how a fortnightly welfare payment could eliminate all poverty faced by people in these situations. This payment would certainly reduce the amount of financial pressure placed on single parent families, but would definitely not eliminate poverty. These payments would make everyday life easier for single parents, but it would be very tough to bring up a child on this welfare payment. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for tonight. From the team, we'll see you next time. Good night.